Let's jump right into this explainer and unpack the massive paradigm shift happening right now between classic software licenses and modern AI. Look, if you're building, buying, or investing in AI today, the ground beneath your feet is literally shifting. We're looking at a fundamental clash between the old rules that built the open source internet and the wild new reality of artificial intelligence.
To kick things off, we really have to ask this crucial question. Is your AI actually open source? Because as we're going to see, the label open source is being thrown around very loosely by some of the biggest players in tech. What might look like a totally free and clear foundation for your next big product, well, it might actually be a complex web of legal restrictions hiding right in plain sight.
Here is our roadmap for this explainer. We'll quickly cover the code versus weights gap, the classic OSS gold standard, open washing, and custom licenses, the failure of copyleft, and finally, enterprise risk and reality. Section 1. The code versus weights gap, applying old rules to new tech. Think of this gap like the difference between a blueprint and a baked cake. Traditional open source licenses, they were built for source code, right? It's human readable, it has super clear copyright ownership, and it's easy to see exactly how it works. But AI model weights, they are completely different beasts. They aren't code in the traditional sense. They're essentially the highly compressed mathematical outputs of proprietary training processes run on massive datasets. If you're trying to figure out who owns what, the legal system knows exactly how to handle a blueprint. But a baked cake? That legal status is totally unsettled right now.
Moving to Section 2, the classic OSS gold standard, the enterprise benchmark for legal clarity.
The absolutely crucial point here is that once code is published under classic open source terms, no one can unilaterally change the rules or revoke your rights. They are highly permissive and, most importantly, they are permanent. Enterprise procurement teams absolutely love this because it means they can build multi-million-dollar businesses on top of this software without lying awake at night worrying that a vendor is going to suddenly pull the rug out from under them. The two giants in this space really highlight the stakes perfectly. On one hand, you have the Apache 2.0 license. This is the absolute enterprise favorite because it includes an explicit patent grant and a termination clause that actively deters patent trolls. It's the gold standard. On the other hand, we have the MIT license. It's shorter, it's a lot simpler, but it completely lacks that explicit patent clarity. When you apply that to AI models, where the training methodologies and inference techniques might be heavily patented, that missing patent grant creates some serious theoretical legal exposure. But hey, don't worry, there are actually real, highly capable AI models out there using these pristine, classic licenses, and legal teams literally jump for joy over them because they remove all that friction and contingent liability. We're talking about models like Mistral Small 3.1, QN3, Devonstral, Phi 4 Mini, and surprisingly, even OpenAI's GPTs OS reasoning model. They're all available under pure permissive terms. If you build on these, you just completely avoid an entire class of enterprise risk. It's a massive win. All right, Section 3, open washing and custom licenses, the reality of the AI landscape. We really need to nail down this distinction because a model with open weights is definitely not the same thing as open source. Open weights basically just means you can download the parameters to your computer, that's it. But the license attached to those weights, it often includes major strings that would instantly disqualify it from being considered true open source software. The risk gap we're talking about here is massive. Classic OSS is totally immutable, with absolutely no use restrictions. Custom AI licenses, on the flip side, feature updatable terms where your continued use equals acceptance, they have termination rights on breach, and they pack incredibly strict usage policies. Basically, they are complex contractual agreements, not just simple copyright licenses. When you look at the biggest custom licenses in the game right now, you immediately spot restrictions that classic open source completely forbids. Take Meta's Llama 3, for example. It famously caps you at 700 million monthly active users and outright bans you from using its outputs to train competing models. Then you've got Google's Gemma, which carries a flow-down obligation, meaning you literally have to force their usage policies onto your own customers. And NVIDIA's open model bans training competing models too. Oh, and guess what? Not a single one of these includes an explicit patent grant. All of this is leading to a pretty harsh reality check for the industry. The Free Software Foundation and the Open Source Initiative are actively calling this out. They're pointing out that models heavily marketed as open are actually failing the most basic freedoms of open source software. Restricting who can use a model or dictating what they can build with it directly violates the foundational freedom zero of open source. This is exactly what we call open washing. To draw a really sharp line in the sand, the Open Source Initiative created a new standard in 2024 to clarify exactly what you need to share to earn the title. Under the Open Source AI definition, or OSAID 1.0, you can't just drop the weights online and call it a day. No way. You have to provide the code, the parameters, and incredibly detailed information about the data used to train the system, ensuring a skilled person could substantially recreate it. But wow, is this controversial? The OSI ended up compromising. They required data information, like provenance and processing methods, rather than the raw, full training datasets, largely because much of that data is hopelessly tangled up in copyright or privacy laws. However, organizations like the Software Freedom Conservancy strongly object to this compromise. Their argument? If you don't have the actual data, you can't truly study or modify the AI. You're basically just flying blind. Moving to Section 4. The failure of copyleft. Why share alike doesn't work for AI. In the traditional software world, copyleft is a powerhouse. It ensures that no commercial entity can just swoop in and build a proprietary, closed product on top of an open foundation. The rule is super simple. If you use GPL code and distribute your software externally, you have to share your source code under those exact same open terms. It's a viral share-alike mechanism that has protected open source for decades. But here's the massive problem. Copyleft structurally fails when it comes to AI models. The very definitions just do not map to how this tech works. First off, what even is a derivative work? If you fine-tune a model, is that legally a derivative? Honestly, the law isn't sure yet. Second, what is the source code of an AI? You could argue it's the training data, and equating copyleft to disclosing proprietary training data, that is a total non-starter for developers. And third, there's the API gap. The GPL triggers when you distribute software, but most people use AI over an API, meaning, legally speaking, they aren't distributing anything at all. Let's wrap things up with Section 5. Enterprise risk and reality, the tangible business consequences. The absolutely crucial takeaway for enterprise legal teams is that your AI model's license type isn't just some legal footnote. It is a fundamental product architecture decision. The risk gap between a standard Apache 2.0 license and a custom model license surfaces dangerously during fundraising or M&A due diligence. Think about it. If you've built your core product on a model whose license can randomly be revoked or whose terms cap your scale, investors and acquirers are going to spot that instantly and flag it as a massive contingent liability. For enterprise procurement teams, this difference is literally night and day. Classic OSS, like Apache 2.0 or MIT, that sails through standard approval seamlessly. It's practically approved by default. But if you try to bring a Gemma model into a heavily regulated enterprise, you're going to hit a massive brick wall. Gemma requires you to pass its uses restrictions down to all of your clients, creating huge flowdown issues. And Llama 3? That 700 million user cap will absolutely get flagged by any venture capital firm doing due diligence. Now look, if you absolutely must use a custom license because of a massive performance advantage, like maybe that specific open rate model just completely crushes the benchmarks for your use case, your legal team has to follow some incredibly strict compliance steps. You've got to map every single product use case against their acceptable use policy. You have to actively incorporate flow-down obligations into your own customer terms of service, and you must add those scale thresholds straight to your commercial IP risk register. But ultimately, if you can just find a true Apache 2.0 or MIT model that meets your performance needs, you completely bypass all of this legal friction. It becomes a smooth plug-and-play situation that lets your engineering team actually focus on building an amazing product rather than forcing your legal department to constantly monitor complex, ever-changing terms of use. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to ponder as the open-source AI landscape continues to rapidly evolve. If the underlying recipe for the intelligence you are relying on is locked away in a black box of unreleased training data, are you truly standing on an open foundation, or are you just renting space in someone else's walled garden? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and remember, keep asking the hard questions about the tools you're building with